The American Recut, a spoiler-free review show where I, Nick,
And I, Brendan, dissect films and television to save you from atrocious media.
In John Wick 3 Parabellum, super assassin John Wick is on the run after killing a member of the International Assassins Guild, and with a $14 million price tag on his head, he is the target of hitmen and women everywhere. Directed by Chad Stahelski and written by Derek Kolstad and Shay Hatton.
Alright, John Wick 3, that was a roller coaster.
It was. But let's go ahead and talk about this with our usual categories. First things first, let's talk about the most important thing in these movies, effects.
There was some CGI in this one, in contrast to some of the other John Wick movies, I think.
Sure, but I think that with effects, I wanted to look more at just a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff, which is fight choreography, camera movement, things like that. Which I think that for the effects of this film, in comparison with the other John Wick films, since they have a highly unique style to them, this one actually suffers a little bit compared with the other two.
Really?
Yeah, and that's mostly due to the extended fight scenes that happen in this movie. There are a number of fight scenes which go on for minutes at a time. I think there's one that lasts for upwards of almost 10-15 minutes, which is near the end.
The final fight lasted, quite a while.
Yeah, and there's a certain point in these films where if a fight drags on for too long, you lose some of a critical element of the John Wick films, which is the feeling that these characters are on a wire and one mistake will kill them. Because after a certain point, it stops feeling like there's a real tension to it.
It's funny you mentioned mistakes. That felt like there was a lot of mistakes that went on in these fights. A lot of tripping and stumbling, but we'll get into that later. Anyway.
Well, right, they make a lot of mistakes and it just keeps going. These fights are too long, in my opinion.
Yeah. Let me see. Anything else to add to effects?
You mentioned CGI. There are some times where the CGI doesn't quite hold up or it doesn't look quite right, or a little bit too rubbery, things like that.
Yeah. Oh, just overall silly, too.
Alright, next up, let's talk about the story, which,
Speaking of silly, yeah.
Speaking of silly, you're right. If you're coming back into this after John Wick 1 and maybe didn't see John Wick 2 for whatever reason, you're going to notice a stark contrast in the story, which is that it feels like the story has taken on much more of an important role than effects, like in the first John Wick or second John Wick, arguably, which, it's not to the film's benefit. The story here is weak.
Okay, now, full disclosure, I did not see John Wick 2. I did see John Wick 1 and thoroughly enjoyed that one, but I was a little lost in what was going on. Because, like you said, this film took place after, a week and a half after the second movie?
No, all three of the movies take place within a week and a half of each other.
What? Oh my god! How the weeks have aged John Wick.
Or apparently haven't touched him because he got his side stitched up about a week ago, and it's fine now.
Wow.
And that's one of the things, too, with these kinds of movies that film so far apart but all take place in the same points in universe, is that you're going to notice a lot of things where if you think about it for too long, it's going to bother you. Which are things like, didn't John Wick's wife just die? Why is he so, not really mourning her at all? That dog was a lot bigger than it was.
Wow, John Wick has had a month. He has had a month.
Like a week and a half, not even a month.
Jesus!
But yeah, the story is pretty weak in this one, and it feels like it's a little bit too involved with itself. Like, it's beginning to take itself seriously, where in the first John Wick, and arguably the second, the story was for the convenience of the action. Now it seems like they've decided that this silly story that's set up before is critical, and it's disappointing.
Moving on, let's talk about the characters that make up this story then. Of course, John Wick.
Of course. And I guess Winston, the hotel manager?
Yeah, Winston. Oh yeah, and the hotel clerk. I always forget his name, but he was cool as ice, man. Let me see. I guess that's all. There's also.
That's all the characters that matter.
Yeah, there's a plethora of characters, but none that really last long.
And as has happened a few times in the John Wick films, there is a rotating cast of other assassins who come in, display some kind of unique skill or some kind of unique, interesting alternative to John Wick's style, and then exit the film just as quickly.
You're right.
The characters in this one aren't as strong. Like you've seen from the trailers, that there is the woman who has the dogs, which is okay, but her fight scene is also one that goes on a little bit too long, possibly because they got the star power and didn't want to waste her. hard to say.
And her story arc just completely confused me, and I'll talk about that more in the ramble on, but I was completely thrown off.
Yeah, generally though, there's not a lot of characters who aren't just kind of people who step in and say their name, have the boss fight music begin, and then be a boss fight. And like you'd expect, a lot of times whenever John is fighting people, they usually have a helmet on or a turban or something to obscure their identity, so that you know that they're just one of the goons.
Yeah. Minion numbers 1 through 20.
Minions 1 through like 5,000.
No kidding. With all the bodies that dropped.
Themes.
Don't sell your soul to save your life, I guess? Or, I don't know.
Be who you choose to be. Yeah, they're pretty weak themes in general. And
Very.
They don't particularly tie in with the story aside from very surface level, like, be a good person themes, which,
Right.
Would you recommend seeing this in theaters, though? Or do you have any final closing statements on it as well?
It's a mediocre action movie. I wouldn't see it in theaters. I didn't see the first John Wick in theaters. I just saw it in the comfort of my own basement, you know? I mean...
Alright. I would say that of the films that are in theaters at the moment, this is one of the better ones. And if you've gone to John Wick just for the effects extravaganza and the choreography, you'll still be pleased with this one. There are some extended fight scenes, and if you like kind of the boss fighty enemies in these where they have like an actual name and show up a few times, you'll probably be fond of this one too in some ways. Don't go in here for the story, don't go in here to see the end of the story either, because this one is a spoiler, but this is not the end of the John Wick series. Alright, well, thank you for joining us, and feel free to join us in the Ramble On.
This has been Brendan.
And Nick.